related to death scenes and crime scenes.
Okay. And talk to me a little bit about what is forensic anthropology.
So, forensic anthropology is a subspecialization of biological anthropology, and it's specifically focused on the analysis of human skeletal remains, including things like estimating sex, age, ancestry, stature, and also things like defects on remains related to trauma, identification methods, and scene recovery of human remains.
Now, you mentioned identification. Would that include situations where there's been suspected burning of the of the corpse?
The identification part's more about establishing the identity of a deceased person, but we do specialize in the study of burned remains and other postmortem alterations to the body.
Can you tell me a little bit about your educational background?
Yes, I have a BS in anthropology from Central Michigan University, a master's in anthropology from Chico State University, a PhD in anthropology from Texas A&M University.
Are there certain board certifications that you were required to participate in as part of this specialty?
Although it's not required, it's strongly recommended that practitioners become board certified. And I am board certified by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology since 2012.
Okay. Are there any affiliations or organizations that you're associated with or participate with?
There are several, and while these are not qualifications, these are indicate participation in the field. So I am a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I am the chair of the Organization of Scientific Area Committees Forensic Anthropology Subcommittee.
And how long have you engaged in the practice of forensic anthropology?
I have been involved with forensic anthropology for about 21, 22 years.
Have you done any publications or research?
Yes, I have published many articles and book chapters, as well as books related to forensic anthropology and other areas of biological anthropology.
And in regards of training of your specialty in terms of um, fire caused issues related to the burning and fire, what sort of training have you had in that capacity?
Throughout my education, I have learned about burned human remains through coursework and trainings and workshops. But I have personally assisted on over 100 burned remains cases. I assisted with like World Trade Center identification efforts, which involved a lot of burned remains. And our team is the main team who does fire victim recovery for wildfire victims in the state of California.
Okay. Okay. Now, you spoke previously about uh, part of your organization is to help law enforcement agencies. Is it primarily your position in aiding law enforcement agencies, or do you help in defense cases as well?
Um, we don't discriminate between whether we work with the prosecution or the defense. So we have assisted the defense in cases where we thought we could provide useful information and perspective about a case.
Okay. Okay. And how have you testified before in front of a court?
I have.
And how many times have you done that?
I think it's around 7 or 8 times, and then I've had other depositions.
Okay. And I think I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again. Is there any specialized knowledge or training that you would be required to have as part of your title as a forensic anthropologist?
Yes, you'd have to be a specialist in the anatomy and biology of the human skeleton. You would have to be able to identify postmortem alterations, including burning on human remains, and be able to properly categorize those modifications. And you have to have expertise in how to identify evidence of skeletal trauma on human remains.
Okay. Okay. Judge, I previously had marked Defense Exhibit 136. My understanding, and I won't speak for the state, but my understanding is the state has no objection to the admission of 136.
We do not, Your Honor.
All right, and Exhibit 136 then is offered and admitted.
And can you explain what the exhibit is, Mr. Pryor?
The exhibit is Dr. Bartolink's report, Judge.
Thank you.
And Judge, for ease of use, and for me and probably everybody else, I'd like to utilize the Elmo. My understanding is the state has a copy of the very document as well. And I'd like, for purposes of publication, to use the Elmo device to publish.
Okay, if you'd like to publish a conforming printed copy of the exhibit
Okay.
on the Elmo without objection from, if there is no objection from the state, you can publish it that way.
Your Honor, we have no objection to that.
All right.
Now, Dr. Bartolink, you were contacted by my office for what purpose?
We were asked to analyze the skeletal remains of Tylee Ryan.
Okay. And I'd like you to go through the process of what steps you took to conduct that review and investigation.
Yeah, so me and my colleagues, Dr. Colleen Milligan and Ashley Kendall, came up to Rexburg, Idaho, and did an analysis of Tylee's remains on December 18th. We worked with the Rexford Police Department to unpack Tylee Ryan's remains and to sort them into anatomical position on a table so that we could conduct an analysis. We performed an inventory, which is a tabulation of all of the bones that were present. We also filled in a skeletal diagram indicating which portions of Tylee's remains were present and absent. Because she was already identified, we did not conduct an estimations of sex, age, etc. But we did conduct a trauma analysis by examining each bone to look for any kind of defects or modifications. And we also recorded the pattern of burning across the skeleton.
And the length of time in order for you to do this was approximately how long?
We conducted this in the span of one day, and it was 3 forensic anthropologists working together. And so we were able to conduct that work in approximately a 6 to 7 hour period between the 3 of us.
Okay. So 18 hours of between the 3 of you approximately.
No, total of about 6 to 7 hours with us working all together simultaneously as a team.
Okay. So but the 3 of you were all engaged in work at the same time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, and those folks were associates with your organization, is that correct?
Yes, they are professors that work with me in the Human Identification Lab and are professors at Chico State University.
Both PhDs.
Correct.
And both have similar experience and training and as you have, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, as part of your review and investigation, you prepared a report, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And I'm not going to go into every word in the report, but in essence, as part of your investigation, what did you discover in regards to the inventory of the remains?
We found that there were certain areas of Tylee Ryan's remains that were absent, and this included large parts of the vertebral column, most of the left and right arms, and large portions of the legs, kind of from mid-thigh down towards the ankle on at least one of the legs.
And Judge, could I utilize the Elmo device at this point?
Yes.
So I'm showing you a illustration from your report, and there is a laser pointer up there somewhere, if you can find it. And then off to your left is a large screen. And if you could just go through in general, the areas that you found were not present at the burial site of Tylee Ryan, and just basically describe each one for me, if you would.
Yeah, so the way that this skeletal diagram is labeled is on the left side is a front view of the skeleton, and on the right side is a back view. Anything that's colored in black was absent, which means we could not identify those portions of the body in the inventory. So we were missing a little bit of the skull from the left eye socket, a little bit here from the back of the skull. And then if we move down towards the limbs, we're missing almost all of the right arm except for just the shoulder and a small piece of this forearm bone right here. We're missing almost the entire left arm except for the shoulder. We are missing most of the ribs, but we were not able to label those individually because we could not determine which rib was which because they were burned and fragmented.
Okay, I'd have you stop there for just a moment, and please forgive my interruption, but when you say fragments of the ribs, is it your testimony that the majority of the rib cage was missing?
I wouldn't say the majority, but a large portion of the ribs were not represented in the inventory.
Okay.
Mr. Pryor, I apologize for the interruption. Could I have a quick sidebar with counsel, please?
Excuse me, Doctor. Judge, may I proceed?
All right, yes, apologies for that interruption on the sidebar. You can continue, Mr. Pryor.
So I think we were at the last, we let off, we talked about, I think my comment was the majority of the rib cage, but you said instead it was a large portion of them.
That is correct.
Okay, and then can you continue with your pointing out the different remains that you were unable to locate?
Yes. So as we move down, we can see that from about the mid thigh area, these are the femur bones, all the way down to just a little bit of the top of the shin bone here, the tibia bone. No bones could be found from those areas. And we had a little bit of the right leg here, missing this section down here. And then on the left leg, we have almost nothing represented from that leg, except for a few small fragments. So we're missing fairly large portions of the skeleton.
You're missing large portions of the skeleton.
That is correct.
Now, you are an expert in the area of forensic anthropology. And you mentioned that you are involved in the recovery as it relates to wildfire victims in California as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that you have, and I don't know how to talk to you about this, but the part of your job is scientific testing of remains and the impact that they can have with fire. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you conduct experiments in that regard, right?
We have done some training exercises and colleagues of mine have as well, where we have experimentally burned a willed body donor.
Okay, and I'm going to stop you there. What that is in a situation where someone has identified on their donor card that they would be willing to be part of a testing, scientific testing, and that's how you obtain the body to engage in your testing. Is that correct?
That is correct, and these are for training exercises for law enforcement and for search and rescue personnel.
Okay. And explain to me the process of what you did to run these tests of the will donor body.
So these tests typically involve kind of building what sort of looks like a funeral pyre out of pallets.
Okay, and when you say a funeral pyre, are we talking about a small brush fire?
It's usually multiple pallets, probably around 4 or 5.
4 or 5 pallets.
Yeah, to create enough fuel to burn the body.
So this is a large fire.
Correct.
Would the expression a bonfire be appropriate?
Yes, it would be, similar in size to a large bonfire.
Okay. And would it be
Your Honor,
possible?
at this point, I'd like to make an objection and ask for a quick sidebar.
All right, we'll have a sidebar. All right, at this time, the court's determined we need to make a evidentiary ruling and do that outside the presence of the jurors before we proceed further with this. So the jurors will be asked to just please stand up if you would and line up out in the hall, and we don't need a full break. I don't think this will take very long to get through, but we do need to take up that matter, and I think the most efficient way is to do that. So apologies for the inconvenience, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, but if we could have you please exit the courtroom, we'll take up this evidentiary matter.
All right, please.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, Mr. Wixom, I understand the state had an objection to this stage of the testimony. If you'd like to lodge the objection, you may.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
You can go ahead. I understood the state was proposing an objection to this particular line of questioning.
We are, Your Honor, and for the record, we are objecting to the line of questioning with regard to the experiment that it appears the witness is attempting to go into. The basis for the objection, Your Honor, is that while we did receive a 27-page report from this expert, nowhere in the report that I can see did it reference the particular experiment that's being talked about. The biggest concern the state has is under Rule 16, we're entitled to have a summary report of his conclusions, including the data and facts upon which he relied. When we received this report, we provided it to our two experts and had them look at the report in preparation for their own testimony. Certainly, I'm prepared here today to respond to and to deal with the conclusions in the summary report as provided, but we didn't have an opportunity to have our experts consider the way and the methodology that he may have used in this experiment we didn't know about in preparation for a potential cross-examination here, nor in preparation for the calling of our own witnesses. And so for that reason, as to the line of questioning, any reference to any experiment, we would object to that being admitted at this time.
All right, and if you'll give me a moment, I'm just briefly reviewing through the report. And so that was admitted as Defense Exhibit 136. And your proffer to the court here, Mr. Wixom, is that contained within that 27-page report, there's no mention of an experiment regarding fires. Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding, Judge, and I believe that's been confirmed off the record.
All right, response, Mr. Pryor.
Judge, this was part of a training exercise to show how he analyzed and determined burn marks, deciding when and where a corpse and how it was burned. So if the court would like me to rephrase it, instead of rephrasing it as an experiment, I can rephrase it as a training to in order to help aid him and his organization in making the determinations that they do as part of this. I'm not suggesting in any way at this point the manner and type in which the remains of Tylee Ryan were burned. What I'm suggesting, Judge, is this was a training exercise that his organization engages in as part of his wildfire training, and that he's describing that this is the methodology that they use to do that in this particular isolated incident. I don't think it's necessary in that situation. This report would be 100 pages if I had to put in every training exercise this expert has engaged in to gain the knowledge that he has.
Okay, so to be clear here, you're referencing as part of foundation or his basis of expertise that he's done this type of training before, but what you are not intending to proffer here is some specific evidence relating to a scientific experiment that would apply to the remains in this case. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's absolutely right, Judge. This is a foundational question that deals with Dr. Bartling's experience and how he makes determinations in terms of folks who are victims of fire.
Okay. Any further argument or response from the state?
Judge, with that proffer, the state would withdraw the objection. It wasn't referenced in the report, so we didn't have a proper understanding. But if it's limited to that purpose, we withdraw the objection.
Okay, and I would find it proper in terms of foundational for expertise to be established under Rule 702. And so with the state withdrawing that, we'll go ahead. If that's where the testimony's heading, Mr. Pryor, we'll let the jurors back in. Of course, if it were going into a realm of some specific experiment that took place relating to the evidence in this case, then likely the objection could be renewed, and I would then issue a further ruling.
And Judge, for clarity with the jury, I think what I will do is rephrase experiment, and with the defense or with the state's permission, I'll use the word training. And that might alleviate any confusion the state might have with where I was going.
Okay, and I think that would help clarify things. So thank you, counsel. We'll go ahead and have the jurors brought back in, and you can continue with your line of questioning, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you. All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to continue on your direct, you may.
All right, and Judge, I'll start with Dr. Bartling. We were talking about a training that you were participating in terms of utilizing a donor, a willing donor, and engaging in the intentional burning of that donor for purposes of scientific training. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's part of a training course.
Okay, and can you elaborate on what that encompassed?
So essentially setting up something that would be similar to a funeral pyre, but having multiple pallets stacked and cutting out sections of those pallets. So you'd have pallet underneath the donor as well as on top. And we're trying to achieve a certain level of burning in the study. And so it requires the use of a fair amount of fuel source. In this case, it was the wood pallets.
Okay, and when you're talking about a fair amount of fuel source, is that a significant amount of fuel source?
You need combustible materials, and so a body does not easily burn without having combustible materials. And so using wood is an effective way of achieving a large fire to reduce a body's mass down to the bones.
You used the expression funeral pyre. That would suggest a sizable fire.
Yeah, like a large bonfire.
Okay. And would the use of just gasoline, would that obtain the same result?
So typically accelerants don't generate enough fuel. They burn away quickly, so they don't generate enough fuel to sustain combustion of a human body for a long period of time. So usually you need other types of combustible materials.
And in regards to in regards to a funeral pyre as such, so if I understand you correctly, just the use of gasoline on a donor corpse would not achieve the burning to obtain the results you're looking for.
In my experience, no.
Okay. It would have to require a significant amount of when you say, I think you used the term fuel, that would be wood.
Could be wood or other types of combustible materials.
Okay. Okay. Something that would burn easily
That's correct.
in a large quantity
That's correct.
to generate a significant fire
Yes.
over a long, prolonged period of time
Yes.
to obtain the same result.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'd like to go back, if we could utilize the Elmo again, Judge.
Yes, you may.
You pointed out in black on this illustration, all of the remains that were not present when you did your review and investigation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would the use of a fire be the explanation as to why you didn't have a complete skeleton?
Only partially. So there were bones that could not be identified to a specific skeletal element, but there was so much missing that was not accounted for. So I believe there are a large amount of these remains that are actually missing, but a small amount are bones that I could not identify what they were.
So you reviewed the testimony of the excavation of the site with a bulldozer. Is that correct?
I did review the reports on the excavation of the remains.
And that they used a bulldozer and took care to try to locate all of the remains. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And yet they didn't have the remains.
I don't know where the missing remains are, so I can't comment on.
Okay. But in fact, you don't have all of the remains, correct?
That is correct.
And you believe that the remains could not be determined to have been burned out or disappeared as a result of a fire. Is that correct?
Not entirely. Yes, that's correct.
And there are bones missing.
Yes.
Okay. Significant amount of bones missing, right?
Yes, you can see from the skeletal diagram, everything in black was not identified in the remains.
Now, I want to continue with your report. Were you able to make a determination as to whether the body was burned as being intact?
Based on the burn pattern, I do believe that the most likely possibility is that the body was burned as a whole, not in pieces.
Okay. And would it be fair to say you can't make a determination as to the length of time it would take to burn the body?
We could only provide sort of minimum timeframes, but there's, how much fuel is used, the size of the body, and other factors all can alter those parameters.
So there's no definitive way to determine how long it took to put Tylee's remains in the manner in which they were found. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In addition, there were some fragments, and I want to use the word fragments because in the fire pit, there were some objects that were removed from the fire pit. Do you recall seeing that?
Yes.
Are you able to determine what type of fragments those are?
Most of the bones that were in the fire pit lacked diagnostic characteristics, so they could not be identified as being either human or animal.
Right. So we don't know what those fragments were. Would that be fair?
That is correct.
You noted that there was a canine mark on part of the remains of Tylee. Is that correct?
That was not something that I noted, but had been noted by the anthropologist with the FBI.
Okay. And do you recall the location of that canine mark offhand?
I believe it was on one of the shoulders, so where the shoulder connects to your shoulder blade. I don't remember if it was on the left or right side, but it's we made those observations and did not see evidence of scavenging. But sometimes making those determinations is very challenging.
And I said canine, I meant carnivore.
Yes,
So we don't know when a carnivore may have made those marks on the body. Is that correct?
we do not, and I'm not certain if they're carnivore marks or related to the burning process.
Okay. I want to talk to you about whether you can make a determination as to where Tylee Ryan's body was burned.
I cannot make that determination.
So in other words, you can't make the determination that her body was burned on Chad Daybell's property. Is that correct?
I cannot make that determination.
And you can't make a determination as to the day or time that the body was burned. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What you can make a determination is that the body was burned intact to your best opinion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you can't make a determination as to whether the body was burned and then at subsequent time placed in Chad Daybell's backyard. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Judge, I have nothing else at this point.
All right, that'll conclude the direct examination then. Mr. Wixom, I presume will be doing cross, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Good morning, Dr. Bartlink.
Good morning.
And am I saying that correctly? It's Bartlink?
You pronounced it perfectly.
Yes, thanks. So, Dr. Bartlink, you've already, I think, shared with the jury that in preparing and in conducting your own analysis of Tylee's remains, you looked at the autopsy report that had been done on Tylee. Is that true?
That is correct.
Likewise, I think you've indicated that you did review the FBI reports from Dr. Angie Christensen and a report from Dr. Halapaska. Is that true?
I did, yes.
Okay. And you have a professional relationship, or at least a collegial relationship, with Dr. Angie Christensen, don't you?
That is correct.
In fact, I believe you both published something together.
We are co-authors on a textbook.
Okay. So is it fair to say that she is a colleague that you have respect for?
Judge, I'm going to object. Witness bolstering.
Sustained.
When you reviewed her report and Dr. Halapaska's report, didn't you indicate in your own that when you compared your findings with theirs and with the autopsy, that you found no substantive difference in the analysis of Tylee's bones?
That is correct.
And you were asked a question by the defense about the ability to estimate a time with which it took to burn Tylee's remains. And I think you concluded that that's not possible. Is that right?
There are just too many variables that are unknown, so I would not feel comfortable making any kind of determination.
In fact, in your report, wasn't that a question that you were specifically asked by the defense in preparation of your analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And the question was, can you burn Tylee's bones within a 2-hour period? That's the question.
That was the question, yes.
Okay. And as I recall from your report, you said it's possible, but you can't determine that. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Likewise, I think you were just asked a question about the ability to determine whether or not Tylee's remains had been burned on the Daybell property. Recall that question?
Yes, I believe I do.
And I think you answered that it's not possible to make that determination, correct?
That is correct.
So is it fair then to say that it may well have been that her remains were burned on the Daybell property?
Judge, objection, offer speculation.
This is, well, overruled.
You may answer.
It's certainly possible that she could have been burned on the property, but it's also possible that she could have been burned elsewhere.
Fair. I think you indicated that there were, no, you've already indicated that not all of the bones from Tylee's remains were found by the FBI or the search who conducted it, correct?
That's correct.
And you can't tell whether or not all of the bones have been entirely burned out because you don't have all of the bones. Is that fair?
Yes. In my experience, we still would expect to find large portions of the bones that were missing even after the burning process has completed. But there are some bones that were just too fragmented to identify. So some of those could just be those bones, but there's still quite a lot not accounted for.
Yeah. And didn't you indicate in your report at some point that it's possible there are still bones that remain on the Daybell property?
It's
Judge, objection, speculation.
Overruled.
That is a possibility.
And just to be clear, it's true that there were many of the remains that you analyzed that were subject to thermal damage, correct?
That is correct.
They had been burned.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And in fact, you had found a number of the remains to have had blunt force trauma. Is that correct?
That is correct. Blunt force defects consistent with perimortem trauma.
Yes. And with respect to defects, in fact, didn't you find that I believe the left mandible, I'm going to call it the jawbone if that's not correct. Let me know.
That is correct.
Okay. That the left mandible had been fractured. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think in 6 different places.
I can't remember the number of places, but there were fractures to the left side of the mandible.
And you did determine that that had been from a blunt force trauma?
Yes, although unable to tell if it's before or after death.
So you can't make the perimortem versus postmortem distinction, but you still believe it was blunt force trauma?
Correct.
Likewise, I think you determined in your analysis that there was blunt force trauma on the skull, the sternum, and the ribs. Is that right?
That is correct.
And there were sharp form defects in the innominate or the hip bone. Is that right?
That is correct.
The sacrum
That is correct.
and the cervical spine.
The ones on the cervical spine are possible sharp force defects, but could not make a definitive determination on those.
And with respect to the sharp force defects, you did indicate that you can't exclude as some of the instruments that may have caused those to have been either a shovel or a pickaxe, correct?
That cannot be excluded. I believe I provided a long list of possible implements.
Yeah. And in fact, I think you confirmed that some of those traumas could have been from a chopping force. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you indicated a machete may have been used.
That can't be excluded.
And I think finally, you had indicated that there had been some rib fractures. Is that right?
Yes, I believe there were at least 2 rib fractures documented in the report.
And you likewise believe that they were likely caused from blunt force trauma?
Yes, consistent with blunt force trauma.
Finally, I think in your report, you indicated that there were approximately a total of 18 sharp force defects in Tylee's bones, as well as a minimum of 16 impacts that were possible perimortem impacts on Tylee's bones. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, I have no more questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wixom. Mr. Pryor, you can conduct redirect if you'd like.
Thank you, Your Honor. There is no distinguishable way to determine the location, the specific place where this blunt force trauma took place, is there?
There's not.
Judge, I have nothing else. Thank you.
All right, that will conclude then the testimony of Dr. Bartlink. So I'll inquire next, counsel, if he's to remain under your subpoena, Mr. Pryor.
He is not, Judge.
Okay, you are released then from the subpoena. Thank you for appearing and testifying. You can be excused. All right, Mr. Pryor, does the defense have a next witness to call?
Judge, could we have a sidebar just very briefly?
Yes. All right, thanks, everyone. At this stage of the proceedings, then, we do need to take up another issue outside of the presence of the jurors. And although it's a little sooner than typical, I think given that this will take a few moments, it's just logical to take have the jurors take the mid-morning recess. We'll take this matter up outside of the presence of the jurors. And so we will have that, and then we'll take a break as well at the end of the matter we take up outside the juror's presence. So if we could have the jury excused at this time for the mid-morning break, we'll do that now.
All right, please.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, we're on the record now. Outside of the jury's presence, the courtroom's still here in these proceedings. After sidebar with counsel, the court's been advised that at this point, the defense does not intend to call any further witnesses. So I guess the remaining issue or question to address would be whether or not the defendant's going to testify. Mr. Pryor, is that the status of where things stand with the defense case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Daybell, I will instruct you that there is going to be a jury instruction in this case the court's going to give. It states, and I'm paraphrasing, that you do have a constitutional right not to be compelled to testify. The instruction will say the decision whether to testify is left to the defendant acting with the advice and assistance of the defendant's lawyer. The jury will be instructed not to draw any inference of guilt from the fact the defendant does not testify, and the jury will be instructed not to discuss or enter into deliberations the issue of the defendant chooses not to testify. If in fact you are going to testify, then Mr. Daybell, there's a further admonishment or advisement I would give you going forward. So let me begin with Mr. Pryor and just first just inquire whether or not you have discussed with your client whether or not he intends to testify.
I have discussed that matter with Mr. Daybell, Your Honor.
All right. And does he intend to offer testimony in this trial?
He does not.
All right. Mr. Daybell, have you in fact discussed that issue with your attorney?
Yes,
And has he advised you of your right to either testify or not be compelled to testify in this trial?
he has.
All right. And it's your decision to not testify. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, counsel. I appreciate you clarifying that with the court outside the presence of the jury. So with that, then we'll take our morning recess, and I will ask the defense then in the presence of the jury if they rest their case. And again, the court will provide the instruction to the jurors that they may not consider the decision of the defendant not to testify in their deliberations with that instruction that'll be provided. So we'll take the mid-morning recess, and let's come back on the record in about 15 or 20 minutes. And we'll continue with further witnesses from the state if there are any in the defense resting.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Do you need to use the restroom?
All rise. Folks, please grab all of your belongings as you head out. And return at the top of the hour in 30 minutes.
get started in just a minute. My name's Heather Nahas. I'm the Communications Director for Governor Reynolds. With the Governor today is FEMA Administrator Dan Criswell. It's Criswell. The two of them will be giving an update on their tour today and sort of the progress that's being made here. There may be some other local officials that speak too. After remarks, we'll take about 4 or 5 topics on the question, and then we're running really behind schedule today. People are waiting for us, and we've got to pull both of them out. So few questions. I'll call last question, and then we'll need to wrap up and get moving on to the next thing. All right. Thank you very much. Well, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. You know, I want to start by just thanking Administrator Criswell for being here and on the ground this morning. I said it yesterday. I appreciate so much their quick response, her willingness to fly here, and we can give them all the data. We can show them the destruction, but to really be on the ground and see firsthand and to listen to the stories is really beneficial. So we really appreciate her and her team being here and being on the ground. I also just want to give a shout out to Emergency Manager Cooper and his team for everything that he has done, not only for his team, but for our first responders, our community members, the utilities that are on the ground really working diligently to restore power. I think we're still at about 50%, but when you take a look at the destruction, that's incredible that they're there already, and we actually hit that yesterday. So a shout out to them and just the incredible volunteers that have showed up. I was on the ground yesterday, and I can't even tell you the amount of debris that has been collected and hauled off. In some of those streets, it looked like a different place. You couldn't even see what was left of the homes in a lot of the areas, and especially the downtown area where so many homes were impacted right next to the hospital. Tremendous progress there as well. So just appreciate first responders, law enforcement, community members. I believe Jeremy I guess it was the chair of the Board of Supervisors, said 11 different county secondary road divisions have offered huge equipment to come and help clean out the debris, which is movement. And, I guess they've got some things going on here. They've got a county fair that's going to happen in about 3 weeks. And in addition to that, they've got RAGBRAI that's coming through. So this is a community that's in gear, and just, it is so inspiring to just see just their response to it, looking forward, looking to the future, how strong they are in just complete devastation, and I'm sure the administrator can talk about that. She sees that as she visits across the country. I'm going to give you just a couple updates, and I'm turning it over to the administrator. We were able to get our expedited request to FEMA this morning, so we filed the paperwork. We have expanded the governor's disaster declaration. We now have 32 counties that are included in that, so we added a bunch of counties to that yesterday. We have requested for 4 counties, and you know, a lot of it has to do with the major destroyed property, public assistance for some of our public utilities like the hospital. But you know, in Adair County alone, we had 153 major destroyed homes. Montgomery had 8, Polk County 26, Story County 15, for a total of 202. So, you know, we've had a lot of destruction and damage across the state, and hopefully we'll meet the criteria to qualify. They have policies and metrics in place, and we're going to do everything we can to get that declaration. And I just, again, appreciate FEMA's response and helping us work through that paperwork. And with that, I'd like to invite the administrator to the podium to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Governor. I'd like to just start out by saying, on behalf of the President, our deepest condolences go out to those people who lost friends, family members, neighbors, as a result of the tragic tornado that went through here just a few days ago. We did receive the request from the Governor just today for the expedited major disaster declaration, and we are working through that, and we will process that as quickly as we can. But me being on the ground here today really helps me understand the actual impact. And as much as I've been watching the videos and seeing the pictures of the tornado damage, it just does not do it justice when you're here on the ground and you can see the homes gone, or you can talk to a member who lost their home and they shared their story of how they just barely escaped death, you know, where they decided to stay to keep safe during the storm. Those are the kind of things that you just can't get unless you're here on the ground and talking to people and seeing the impacts firsthand. And so we are going to continue to work with the Governor's team to assess all of the damages that have happened and make sure that whatever we can provide assistance for, that we're able to do so. I heard a lot of stories today as we were walking around town, and we heard about all of the rescues that the first responders did. And I always want to give my thanks to the first responders, because we know that they go out and perform a lot of these life-saving actions while they don't even know if their own homes may be impacted or damaged. And so always want to give my gratitude to the first responders for all of the amazing work that they do during times like this. But I also want to thank the neighbors, right? We also hear so many stories of hope and inspiration, of neighbors helping neighbors. And I often say they're often the true first responders, because they know where the most vulnerable members of their community members are. They know who to go check on and make sure that they're okay.
Yeah, we did.
Did you sometimes hang out outside of work?
We went to a few haunted houses together after the season had ended, yeah.
Did you hang out when you were at work and associate with each other?
Yes.
Did Garth generally talk to you about any issues within his family?
Nope.
Do you recall an occasion when he did share something with you about some family issues?
He told me it was the following weekend after his mom's passing. He talked about that.
What do you recall him telling you about that?
I remember he said that he found her when he got home from work, and he didn't know where his father was. And I don't remember if he said that she was in the bed or next to the bed, but she said she was kind of pale and her lips were blue.
On a typical night, when would work end at the Haunted Mill?
We usually left work around 12:30-ish. Depending on how busy it was, we would go later. So some nights we'd go until like 1 or 1:30. But
And your understanding from what Garth told you was when he got home, he found his mother.
yeah,
And at that time, her lips were blue and she was pale,
yes,
and that he did not know where his father was.
correct.
I have no further questions.
All right. All right, Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, what was the work schedule at the Haunted Mill?
We would open around 7:30 and then it would go to midnight, but we weren't able to leave until the rest of the customers made it through the attraction.
And what days of the week would the Haunted Mill be open during the month, just the month of October, correct?
Correct. And it would be open. They changed their schedule. I think the last 2 weeks of the month it was full time, and then the rest of the month it was just on the weekends.
So if I understand correctly, that the last 2 weeks of October would be every day?
Yes.
Did that include Sundays?
No.
So it was Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday?
Monday through Saturday.
Okay. And the day that the Haunted Mill would close would be the 31st of October,
Correct.
Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And do you know the day that Tammy Daybell died?
I do not.
Okay. So when you told the prosecuting attorney that it was the week after her passing, if you don't know what day she died, how do you know it was a week after her passing?
Garth he took a day off after it happened, and then he was back the following weekend. So it's just when I saw him next.
Okay. So it was the following weekend after the date that Tammy allegedly passed away.
Correct.
Did he mention anything about attending funeral services or any memorials the following weekend?
No, he did not.
Did he say anything about having to do visits with his church or anything like that as part of any program the weekend after that?
No, he did not.
Okay. So he indicated that she had blue lips and she had already passed. Is that right?
Correct.
Did he indicate to you that at that time he played video games until 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates testimony.
Overruled.
Did he say anything to you about the fact that he was playing video games until 3 o'clock that evening? Sir?
No, he did not.
Did he say anything about hearing snoring coming from the room that night as well, sir?
No, he did not.
Okay. And you and Garth would be such close friends, you went to 2 haunted houses in 3 years?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony. Argumentative.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
I'll strike that question.
So how many, you mentioned that you went to a couple of haunted houses. Is that right, sir?
Yeah, we did that all on the same night.
The same night as what?
It was, I think, the following weekend after our attraction had closed. We just went and visited some other places that were still open.
On the 31st. Who went with you?
It was myself, Garth, Kara Briggs, and Emma Moss.
And this revelation that he supposedly made to you occurred,
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative. Move to strike.
Sustained.
and this statement that he made to you supposedly occurred when during this visit?
Objection, Your Honor, again, argumentative with the word supposedly. Move to strike.
I'll sustain that as well, Mr. Pryor.
Can you tell me when and time, date the statement was made to you, sir?
I was still at work at the Haunted Mill. There were a few other scare actors around us at the time. It was a little bit closer to the end of the shift. Garth was pretty quiet most of the night, and then I kind of went up to him and gave him my condolences, and then that's when he told me that he had found her.
So you weren't particularly close friends. Would that be fair?
Yeah, more like close coworkers.
Okay. And this close coworker disclosed to you something very personal about his mother's death. Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
This close coworker decided on one day just to disclose a very personal matter about his mother's death to you. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Blake, redirect.
Mr. Baglin, when Garth talked to you about finding his mother, how did he appear?
He did seem sad. So I could tell something was affecting him.
And was he clear to you in his statement that he's the one that found his mom?
Yes.
And was he clear in his statement that his dad wasn't there?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
All right, that will conclude the testimony then of Mr. Baglin. I don't know if he was here under subpoena from the state, but if so, can he be released, Ms. Blake?
Yes, Your Honor, he may be released.
All right.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. You can step down. All right, does the state have another rebuttal witness to call today?
Yes, Your Honor, the state will call Detective Bruce Mattingly.
Solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thanks.
All right, before we proceed with direct on this rebuttal witness, Detective Mattingly, have you observed any of the trial testimony that's taken place since you were last here?
No,
Have you talked to anyone else about the testimony they've given since you were last here?
no.
All right, thank you for responding to those questions. Ms. Blake, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you. And Detective Mattingly, since it's been a moment since you've been here, would you please remind the jurors where you currently are employed?
Fremont County Sheriff's Office,
And how long have you been employed there?
about 23 years.
What is your current title or position?
Detective Sergeant.
Have you held other positions within the Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
I have. I worked patrol and school resource officer.
And at some point, did you personally become involved in an investigation into Tammy Daybell's death?
I did.
Do you recall approximately when you became involved?
About mid-December.
And was that of 2019?
2019.
And again, is it fair to say that you also were involved in the investigation into the whereabouts of JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan?
Yes,
Were you also involved in the investigation regarding their deaths?
I was.
At some point, do you recall receiving the results of the autopsy for Tammy Daybell?
Yes,
Do you know if anyone of any of Chad and Tammy's children reached out to the sheriff's office?
Judge, I'm going to object without some sufficient foundation.
Overruled.
And specifically in relation to the autopsy?
I do.
And who reached out?
Emma Daybell or Emma Murray.
Do you know at any point if anyone attempted to make contact with Emma Murray in relation to her request?
Yes. I learned that Detective Kai Kakamanu had attempted to reach
Judge,
out.
I'm going to object without foundation.
Overruled.
I learned that Detective Kai Kakamanu had reached out to, or attempted to reach out to Emma and Garth with no response or callback.
Based on that, at some point, did you do something in relation to the autopsy results and Emma Murray?
I did.
What did you do?
So where none of the family members were able to,
Judge, I'm going to object as non-responsive.
Overruled.
Where none of the family members were contacted or had been found, we formed a team and we split up to make contact with most of the Daybell children.
And was that to make contact in relation to the autopsy?
That specifically, yes.
And who specifically were you going to attempt to make contact with?
I was attempting to make contact with Emma.
Do you recall approximately when you attempted to make contact with her?
February 18th, 2021, after school had let out, so maybe around 4:30.
And well, you said after school had let out. Do you know where Emma was working at that time?
She was working as a teacher at Central Elementary in Sugar City.
And did you attempt to make contact with her at the school?
Yes,
And you said it would have been after school let out?
yes,
Did anyone else go with you to try to make that contact?
yes. That would be Lieutenant Ron Ball with Rexburg Police Department.
And prior to this attempt to make contact, had you personally had any involvement with Emma Marie?
Not personally, no,
You'd not had personal contact with her prior to this?
no.
Were you ultimately able to make contact with Miss Marie that day?
Yes, we did.
Did you have some kind of a recording device on?
Yes,
And was a recording made of that attempt to contact her?
there was.
Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 427, and defense already has a copy. And the state's intent would be to ultimately ask to publish a portion of that for identification purposes unless there's a stipulation for admission.
There's no stipulation.
Okay, so without stipulation, you may just publish just enough without any content, obviously, that would influence the jury if it doesn't come in, just enough to establish foundation. I'll permit that.
Thank you, Your Honor. And if I may have that, and I'll play from the exhibit for the court.
Very well.
It's been a while, Rick. Yeah. How you been? Fine. It's been.
And I'll pause right there. Detective Mattingly, do you recognize the voices in that recording?
I do.
And who are those voices we're hearing?
Myself and Principal Rich Gardner.
Does this in fact appear to be a correct depiction of the audio recording that you made that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, based on that, the state would move for the admission.
Any objection?
No.
All right, exhibit 427 is admitted.
And Your Honor, the state would intend to play the exhibit partway through.
All right, if you'll please identify the portions you play when you publish.
And Your Honor, the state will begin to play from minute mark 5:50.
I was at the wrong door. Thought you were going to go at the front. I apologize. I'm Bruce Mattingly with Fremont Sheriff's Office. And the sheriff said that you've been working at trying to get a hold of us.
Yes.
And to talk on the autopsy results. we've been trying to get a hold of you and other family members, but probably been a comedy of errors. We haven't been able to do so.
Okay.
And which is why we showed up here, because we'd like to be able to talk with family, because I know you were the one that made a request,
Yes.
right? So we'd like to be able to do that. And
I'm going to pause here momentarily. Do you know who that female voice is that we're hearing?
That was Emma Daybell.
And did you hear in there where she confirmed she was the one that had requested the autopsy results?
Yes.
I'm going to continue playing. I stopped it at 6:31 for the benefit of the record, and I'll continue playing from 6:31.
because you're here, we're here, want to take a few minutes and talk about that and go over that? Or? Okay. Who is the attorney so we can contact?
So we've worked with Josh Garner before, but right now we don't have an attorney-client relationship with any particular attorney.
Okay. So we
decided we're gonna wait to learn what it is when you're ready to release it.
okay. That is a choice, but we usually just let family, we always let family know. Personally, I've not had anybody really say that they want to wait. That's a little.
We're just not interested in interviewing, answering any questions. We just wanna see it.
Sure.
Not-
We'd like to at least let you know what's in it, and tell you about it. We're not asking for an interview.
I'm going to pause right there, Detective Mattingly. Did you hear Emma again decline to see the results?
Yes.
And what did you tell her in relation to whether or not she would have to be subjected to an interview?
I told her she didn't have to do an interview.
For the record, stopped at minute mark 7:35, and I'll continue playing from there.
So, and of course, like now, if you're always free to leave, you can tell us we're done, anything. We're not looking to ask questions. We do want to just let you know the findings.
And again, stopping at 7:45, Detective Mattingly, did you again hear yourself confirm she would not have to provide information?
Yes.
And starting again from 7:49.
And then later the report will, attorneys will get everything. But where we know it's back, you know it's back, we want to let family know.
Okay.
And let people know what the results are. We can't go in depth on the report, but we can talk and give general findings, at least for now. So would you like that? Would you like to do that? What are your, okay, do you want me to set that up with Josh?
I'll have him call you.
Okay, can I give you my card so he knows who to call? That'd be great. This is an number, right?
Yep.
So, I said that, he knows me, he knows my number. I also, just for preparatory, I was hoping to find you, and I'm glad I did. This number on the back is for victim services, which helps with counseling and anything else because you lost your mom. That's what this number's for, is to help with that. Okay. It is our prosecutor's office. You don't have to talk to the prosecutor. Just say, hey, I'm looking for help with victims services. Here, I'll give you that. And that's for you, for the kids, the rest of your siblings. Okay.
Okay.
And then Josh, he can.
Do you have Josh's number?
Yeah.
Okay.
And pausing at 9:23, Detective Mattingly, did you in fact offer Miss Marie contact information for victim services?
I did.
Did you also offer her contact information for the prosecutor's office?
Yes.
What did you expressly tell her in relation to the prosecutor's office?
To call the prosecutor's office for the help with the victim services. And more specifically, she didn't have to talk with anyone with the prosecutors.
And playing from 9:23.
All right. Are they building a new school over there?
They are. We're
Which one is
growing.
that?
That's gonna be a junior high, and then they're taking third grade out of the school. This is K through 3. They're moving third grade over there. That's 4 through 6 right now, and then sixth grade. Yeah, I'm moving over there across the field, and then they're moving 6th grade over there. There's a junior high down the road that they'll move over there, and then the high school will stay the same. We're just trying to wait until it's finished. It was supposed to be done by this fall, but you know how
Especially these days. For sure. So, are you increasing more principal?
no, it'll be the current principal of the junior high. I'm not sure what they'll use that building for.
Okay.
There was talk about it being a YMCA, but that was just a Sugar City rumor.
I know how small town rumors go.
Yeah, I think they just want a swimming pool, but yeah, so it'll be mostly just rotation.
All right. So I do want to let you know, because we've been having difficulties trying to get a hold of people. Today was the day that we were able to get other deputies, officers to go out and try and find and make contact one way or another.
Okay.
So, if you hear from other family members or you don't, it might be dependent upon if we were able to find them or not. Okay, so I don't want that to be a big blame. I just want to let you know, hey, we haven't been able to get hold of anybody. It's important to be able to let people know or have that opportunity. That's what we were working on. So, okay.
Thank you.
I'm pausing at 11:13. Detective Mattingly, you were informing her that other family members were going to be contacted. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Do you know who some of the other family members that contact was going to be attempted with?
Judge, objection on foundation.
Sustain.
Based on the investigation, did you discuss things with other investigators?
yes,
And you indicated that you had met and talked about going out to try to provide results to some of the kids, the autopsy results.
yes.
Do you know who some of the other individuals from the family were that contact was going to be attempted with?
I do.
And who was that?
Judge, objection, still insufficient foundation.
Overruled.
Garth Daybell, Seth, and Leah.
And was the attempt to reach out to some of those kids going to be done around the same time you were attempting contact with Emma?
Yes,
And at the end of that, did you hear Emma tell you thank you?
she did.
And there was some conversation between you, Emma, and Lieutenant Ball. Did you also hear that?
I did.
I'm going to continue from 11:13.
Josh knows how to get a hold of me. We've talked before, both Vince, he knows how to get a hold of Vince, our office, we're not that big. So have him give us a call, then we can go out and sit down with him and you and talk about it. That is true. We did reach out and he said, we were gonna do a schedule, but he says, as far as I know, I'm not representing, but maybe things have changed.
Okay.
So, get that ball rolling. I'd like you to know about that.
Okay.
Okay? But that's, I'm not gonna make anything up or make you do anything. I do wanna let you know.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
And stopping at 12:14 or 12:15. Detective Mattingly, at the time you were attempting to share these results with Miss Murray, was this still an active investigation?
It was.
And is it fair to say you were not going to provide her a copy of the autopsy at that time based on that?
Correct.
But you were willing to sit down and go over some of the results with her?
Yes,
There was some talk about an individual named Josh. Do you know who that was in reference to?
I do. That was in reference to Attorney Josh Garner.
At any point, did you attempt to make contact with Josh Garner about this?
We did.
What did you learn?
Judge, objection is going to call for hearsay.
Sustained.
Your Honor, and I would argue it's not coming in for the truth of the matter, but for why the officer did what he did next.
Judge, it's absolutely coming in for the truth of the matter.
I'm going to sustain that as hearsay, Ms. Blake.
In the recording, did you hear yourself reference that he'd indicated he wasn't actually representing the kids?
Yes.
And was that in reference to Josh Garner?
Judge, I'm going to move to strike.
It was in the recording.
Overruled.
Yes.
Did Emma ever reach out to the Fremont County Sheriff's Office again in an attempt to get the results?
No.
When you met with Emma, did she tell you anything about concerns regarding her mother's health?
Judge, objection.
Overruled.
She did not.
At the very end of the recording, you say something along the lines of, I do want to let you know. What was that in regards to?
It's in regards to the findings from the autopsy result.
So you wanted to make sure that Emma Marie had access and knew the results of that autopsy.
Yes,
And again, Emma Marie declined to hear those results.
she did.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right. All right, Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
Would you characterize Emma as being polite on that day?
She was.
Responsive?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the autopsy was performed on December 11th of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you obtained the results on February 18th of 2021?
No, we had to obtain those earlier.
Well, how much earlier did you obtain the results?
I don't recall.
Okay. Well, was it a week?
Probably a little longer.
Was it a month?
Could be about close to that.
Was it possible it was a year you had the results?
No.
Okay. So we know it was close to a month. Is that what you recall?
Thereabouts, yes.
Okay. And you held the results, correct?
Yes.
And then at some point you elected to go notify the family. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time of the autopsy on December 11th, 2019, well, let me go back. On February 18, 2021, providing the family with the results, that wasn't any kind of an investigative concern, was it?
No.
Okay. And a month earlier, when you had the results, was there some sort of investigative concern with providing the family notification of why their mother was exhumed and an autopsy was done? Officer?
Yes.
What?
Would you repeat the question?
Yeah. The month before, while you held on to the autopsy, is there some investigative concern as to why you didn't let her know right away?
Yes.
And what was the investigative concern?
On whether or not we can release the autopsies, whether we can provide a copy,
Okay.
and how best to go about doing that without violating any rights or with the investigation going on.
So you were concerned about the investigative and not concerned about the rights of the family to know why you exhumed the
Objection, Your
mother?
Honor. This is argumentative and it misstates the testimony just given.
Sustained.
So was there a concern about protecting the investigation, or was there a concern about holding on to the results until you chose the time to let the family know?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Overruled.
You can answer that.
Repeat the question, please.
Was the concern over an investigation, officer? Or was the concern for a month that you wanted to figure out how you were going to tell the family and when?
Both, I would say.
Okay. Now, at the time that Tammy Daybell was exhumed, were there concerns about the Daybell 5 children knowing about why you're exhuming their mother?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
So at that time, I was not a part of the investigation.
Okay, so you're not aware of any reason why they just didn't tell Garth, Mark, Leah, Emma, Seth about why their mother was exhumed. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered. He said he wasn't part of the investigation at that time.
Sustained.
Okay. I listened to the first part of the tape, officer, and it seems to mention at about 5:50 that Emma says to you, 5:50 on the tape. And if we need to go back and listen to it, it may take me a little bit, but we can do it if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And at 5:50 on the tape, she makes some statement, Emma makes some statement about trying to get a hold of you folks. Do you remember that?
Yes,
How many times did she try to get a hold of you?
I'm aware of one time.
Are there possibilities that she called other people within your agency or other agencies to get a hold of them about this autopsy results?
Possibly.
Okay. And then you made something comment shortly after that. I believe it was at the 6 or 6:02 mark where you said something about it's been a comedy of errors. What was the comedy of errors?
I made that statement trying to lighten the situation about where I knew Detective Kai Kakamanu had attempted to reach out, left messages. We hadn't heard any returns.
Okay. So you previously testified that you're aware of at least one instance where Emma Murray reached out to find out why you exhumed their mother and what the results were. And then
Objection, Your Honor, mischaracterizes the testimony. There was nothing about exhuming.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that.
So you're aware of one phone call where you're discussing with Emma, you're trying to discuss with Emma the results of the autopsy. And you're saying that because of all this difficulty communicating with the family, the expression you use to Emma is a comedy of errors to lighten the situation about telling her why her mother died, right?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered and mischaracterizes testimony.
Overruled.
It's a light situation to tell it.
Mr. Pryor didn't even answer the question yet before you
I'm going to withdraw the question, Judge. And I'll ask another question if I may.
go ahead.
It's a light situation to notify a daughter as to why their mother died. Is that what you're saying?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative mischaracterizes testimony.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that.
Okay. You made a comment about to take a few minutes and talk about the autopsy results, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so it wasn't just a matter of letting her know what the results were, right? You wanted to talk to her about it.
about the autopsy results,
Right.
yes.
You couldn't just tell her what the results found, right?
I didn't want to just throw that out there, no.
Okay.
Hmm.
You wanted to talk about it, right?
Yes,
Now, as a detective, there's been previous testimony about carrying body cams and recorders. Was it your normal policy to have a body cam and a recorder on when you interview witnesses?
we don't have a policy on that.
Okay. So you chose in this instance to wear a recorder, is that right?
I did,
Did you take an instance to wear a body cam as well?
no.
So there's no policy on it, but in this instance, what you were really trying to do was to capture what her reaction would be when you told her about the results. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that question.
Isn't it true your motive to talk to Emma Murray was to gauge a reaction on tape?
No,
So with this discussion about her wanting to get a lawyer, well, let me strike that. So from the time she's exhumed to December 11th of 2019 to February 18, 2021, approximately 14 months. In the interim during that time, let's start in December of 2019 when she was exhumed, and for each and every month, at any time, did you go over and try to talk to Emma Murray about what the results of her mother's autopsy was?
what were those dates again?
Well, the day she was exhumed, December 11, 2019, And the day you approached Emma for the first time personally was February 18, 2021, right?
Correct.
And during those interim times, did you, or anybody from your office to your knowledge, go up to any member of the Murray family and say, we're waiting on the results? Did you do that?
No,
Did you go up to anybody in the Murray family or the Daybell family other than Chad and say, there's been some delays in us getting the report, but we really would like to talk to you and we'll do some pre-planning to do that? Did you do that?
I did not.
Okay. So after 14 months, your organization decided en masse that you're going to hit all of the kids and wear recorders and try to go tell the kids about what's going on, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony, argumentative.
Overruled.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
And then at some point, you know who Josh Garner is, right?
I do.
You've had encounters with him, correct?
Yes.
And at some point, you were aware that Emma had retained Josh Garner, correct?
We learned that she had not.
Prior to that time, were you aware that she had had representation through him?
Yes.
Okay. So you knew that there was a potential connection there, correct?
Correct.
And would you really blame her, Emma, if after 14 months of not hearing anything from your organization, she's a little skeptical to talk to you folks about what you're wanting to say to her?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that question.
You did mention that you weren't interested in interviewing her and asking any questions. You did say that though, right?
Yes.
Okay. So your explanation is that you wanted to be more sensitive to her about letting her know what the results were, correct?
Absolutely.
And you wanted to sit down with her and have an opportunity while the recorder's on to gauge her reaction, right?
I wanted to sit down and discuss that with her, not just for any reaction.
And then at the end, when you're talking about the school, was that also a police tactic to sort of soften her a little bit so that maybe she would open up and talk to you about things?
That was Lieutenant Ron Ball who had made that statement and questioned her about that.
Well, I don't care who made the statement. I asked whether it was a police tactic.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that question.
And then you suggested to her that she get information from the victim services, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the victim services, is that an office within the prosecutor's office?
The prosecutor's office helps manage victim services.
So the fancy way of saying that is the prosecutor has the authority over victim services, or when you say manage, they supervise the victim services program, correct?
As I understand, correct.
Okay. So the prosecutor's office, that would be the same prosecutor's office that issued the order to exhume Tammy Daybell, right?
Objection, Your Honor. This is misstates evidence. Prosecutor's offices don't issue orders.
Oh. All right, Ms. Blake, this is part of the reason why I don't like speaking objections, because now you put that out there. I'm overruling the objection. If the witness knows the answer, he may answer that, and you can correct that on redirect.
Would you ask that again, please?
Well, the prosecutor's office was the organization in Madison County and Fremont County to pursue trying to get an order to have Tammy Daybell's body exhumed, correct?
That was done through a prosecutor's office, I believe, in Utah.
Okay.
Mm.
And the information was to obtain, or the purpose was to obtain information surrounding an investigation of Tammy Daybell in this area as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. So would it surprise you if Emma Murray would be quite hesitant to approach an organization affiliated with the prosecutor's office when she wasn't told her mother was being exhumed?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative calls for speculation.
Sustained.
So you gave her information from organizations that are managed and organized by the prosecutor's office, correct?
Yes.
And the purpose of that was that they could utilize those services to maybe have someone talk to them about what's going on in the case, right?
Among other things,
What are the other things?
such as counseling.
Okay. And you're very concerned about the counseling with the Daybell children 14 months after their mother was exhumed, right?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Overruled.
Yes.
Well, why weren't you so concerned on the day their mother was exhumed and she wasn't, and the whole family on both sides wasn't notified that they were taking their mother out of her burial site?
Objection, Your Honor, this is argumentative.
Sustained.
I have
Move to
nothing-
strike.
Nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right, that last question of counsel is stricken. That concludes cross. Ms. Blake, you can redirect.
Detective Mattingly, counsel asked you about Emma being polite. Is that fair?
Yes,
From what you heard in the audio, were you also polite?
I believe I was.
Was Detective Ball polite?
He was.
Were any threats made to Emma?
None.
I think you testified the autopsy report, maybe the results had come in approximately a month before, give or take.
Yes,
And you, in fact, were there to try to share the results of that report with Miss Murray. Is that correct?
correct.
And she declined.
She did.
As part of your employment and work in law enforcement, have you ever been involved in death notifications?
Several.
Do you generally just go and blurt out what the cause of someone's death is?
No,
Do you generally want to sit down and have that conversation?
I do.
And in this case, you were trying to share autopsy results regarding Emma Murray's mother. Is that correct?
Yes,
Would it be fair to say in your experience that you would want to sit down and discuss with someone when there's been a finding by a medical examiner that the death was homicide by asphyxiation?
I would.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. That'll conclude Detective Mattingly's testimony then. And where this is rebuttal, I don't believe he would be recalled for any reason. Is that correct?
He would not, Your Honor. The state would release him.
Okay. You are released from any subpoena you had, Detective Mattingly. Thank you for coming in and testifying today. You can go ahead and step down.
Thank you.
All right, does the state have another witness to call today?
We do not have additional witnesses for today, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, counsel. The court was advised, as was the jury, of our likely schedule for today. So we are going to recess for the day. We've also got tomorrow off and we'll resume on Tuesday with additional rebuttal. Is that correct, Ms. Blake?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, then we are going to recess for the day. This is a long break for you. You've continued to comply with the court's admonishing instruction. I wanted to put some special emphasis on that just because in the likely event, being this a holiday weekend, you might be around lots of friends and family. Please advise anyone that is curious about your jury service that you're simply not permitted to talk about the case. I think people generally are pretty good to understand and respect that if you are telling them that that's simply the order of the court. I do appreciate your attentiveness. We'll return on Tuesday for additional testimony. And again, I'll admonish you, please don't discuss the case or talk about any of the testimony with anyone else or with each other. You can only do that during deliberations, and please don't do anything to investigate anything about this case while we have this long recess. So we will return for further testimony starting Tuesday morning. And I appreciate all those in attendance today complying with the courtroom conduct order. With that, then we'll be in recess until Tuesday.
Right, please.